On the coldest night of the year, a weary carpenter trudged home through the snow with the only meal left for him and his son, until the sound of faint, desperate cries pulled him toward 3 shivering children alone on a park bench. What happened next would test the limits of sacrifice, break the barriers between 2 very different worlds, and prove that even the smallest act of kindness can change lives forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where you are watching from. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and tell us what you think. Now, let's jump into the story. The snow fell in steady sheets, covering the riverside path in a blanket of white. Noah Hartley walked with his head down, his breath showing in the cold air. His boots crunched on the frozen ground, and his shoulders ached under the weight of his old tool bag. In the crook of his arm, he carried a small paper-wrapped sandwich. It was the last bit of food in his house, meant for him and his 8-year-old son, Finn. The wind pressed against him, sharp and unkind. But Noah kept moving. He thought about the look on Finn's face when he came through the door. He thought about sharing that sandwich by the small heater, making the evening feel less empty. Then he heard it, faint at first, almost hidden by the wind. It was the sound of crying, thin, shaky, and full of fear. Noah slowed, turning his head toward the park ahead. The snow blurred the edges of the world, but as he stepped closer, the shapes became clear. 3 children sat huddled together on a wooden bench. Their coats were thin, their gloves mismatched. Snow clung to their hair and shoulders. Noah's pace quickened. "Hey there," he called over the wind, his voice steady but gentle. "What are you doing out here? It's too cold for this." The oldest, a boy of maybe 9, lifted his head. His cheeks were blotchy from crying, his lips pale. "We can't find our mom," he said, voice trembling. Beside him, a girl about the same age held a small boy close to her chest. The little one's face was pressed into her scarf, his tiny hands barely moving. "We're hungry," the girl whispered. It was so quiet, Noah almost thought he imagined it. He looked around the park. The swings hung still. The pathways were empty. No one else was there. Only the wind moved. Noah crouched, so his eyes met theirs. "How long have you been here?" he asked. The boy shook his head, unable to answer. Inside Noah's coat, his hand brushed against the sandwich. It was simple: 2 slices of bread, a thin layer of meat, and a slice of cheese. Not much, but it was all he had. He thought about Finn, waiting for dinner. He thought about how long it would be until he could buy more food. Then he looked at the 3 children in front of him. Their mittens were wet, their shoes were soaked, and their bodies trembled with cold. Slowly, he unwrapped the sandwich. The paper crinkled loudly in the quiet air. He tore it into 4 pieces. Keeping the smallest for himself, he held the rest out to them. "Here," he said softly, "it's not much, but it'll help." The boy hesitated, glancing at the girl. She gave a small nod, and he took a piece, biting into it slowly. The little one ate without looking up, his hands clutching the bread like it might disappear. As they ate, the snow clung to their eyelashes and melted down their cheeks. The boy looked at Noah and spoke so quietly, it was almost lost to the wind. "You're like a bridge when the ice breaks." Noah didn't fully understand the words, but they settled in his mind. The youngest coughed, a rough sound that made Noah's stomach tighten. Without thinking, he took off his own coat and wrapped it around the small boy. The cold bit at his arms immediately, but the child's shivering slowed. "Come on," Noah said gently. "We need to get you somewhere warm." The girl looked at her brother, then reached out her hand. Her fingers were icy in his. The older boy followed, his grip weak at first, then firmer as another gust of wind cut through them. Noah lifted the toddler into his arms. The boy's head rested against his shoulder, his small body pressed close for warmth. Noah tightened his hold and started walking toward the narrow street that led to his home. Each step crunched through the snow. The streetlights in the distance were dim, barely cutting through the haze. The wind howled behind them, but Noah didn't look back. He focused on the weight in his arms, the small hands in his own, and the thought of heat, blankets, and safety waiting ahead. He didn't know who these children were or what had led them to that bench in the storm. He only knew that tonight they would not be left out in the cold. The door to Noah Hartley's small home creaked open, letting in a rush of icy air. He guided the children inside, closing it quickly to keep the cold out. The living room was small but neat, with a faded rug, a sagging couch, and the faint smell of pine from the old wood walls. The radiator rattled softly, offering what little heat it could. Finn, Noah's 8-year-old son, peeked from the hallway. His brown hair stuck out in every direction, and his eyes widened when he saw the three strangers. "Hi," he said softly, holding a small box of wooden blocks in his hands. "This is Finn," Noah said. "Finn, these are our guests for tonight." Finn looked from his father to the children, then stepped forward. "You can play with these if you want," he offered, placing the blocks on the carpet. Mila, the girl, hesitated, but then set the toddler, Theo, down on the rug. Jace, the older boy, lowered himself beside his siblings. Noah disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 4 mugs. Only one held cocoa, made from the last packet in the cupboard. He set it in the center of the children's small circle. "Share this, okay? Take small sips, it's hot." Mila passed it first to Theo, whose small hands wrapped around the mug for warmth. He took a careful sip before handing it to Jace. Finn waited patiently, taking only the smallest taste when it was his turn. As they warmed up, Noah noticed Mila's scarf had a frayed edge. Without a word, he reached for his old sewing kit from a shelf. Sitting beside her, he threaded a needle and began to repair it. Mila watched quietly, her eyes following every careful stitch. Across town, in the bright and bustling police station, Claire Morris stood at the counter. Her hands gripped the edge as she spoke to the officer. "My children, Mila, Jace, and Theo, they were right beside me at the train station. I turned for a moment, and when I looked back, they were gone." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the fear she was holding back. The officer typed quickly, asking for descriptions. Claire answered with precision, her tone practiced, like someone used to handling crises. But her gaze kept darting toward the station door, as if hoping they would walk through it at any second. When the call came in from Noah, reporting 3 lost children in his home, the connection was made immediately. Within the hour, headlights swept across Noah's small living room window. 2 officers stepped inside, with Claire close behind. Mila spotted her first, leaping to her feet and running into her mother's arms. Jace followed, holding on to her tightly. Theo buried his face in Claire's coat, his small body trembling. "Thank you," Claire said to Noah, her voice polite but cautious. Her eyes scanned the room, the patched furniture, the worn boots by the door, the modest shelves. She noticed the sewing kit on the table and the half-empty mugs. Her gaze returned to him, unreadable. "They're good kids," Noah said simply, his hands resting in his pockets. Claire gave a small nod, pulling her children closer. "We should go." The officers led them out into the cold night. Noah stood at the doorway, watching as they disappeared into the snowy street. The house felt quieter once they were gone. Finn looked up at his father. "Will they be okay?" he asked. "I hope so," Noah replied. But his mind kept replaying the boy's earlier words, "You're like a bridge when the ice breaks." Across the town, Claire sat in the back seat of the police car, holding her children close. Relief filled her. but so did an unease she couldn't name. Noah had helped them, that much was clear. Yet the differences between his life and hers seemed like two roads running far apart. In Noah's home, the radiator clicked and hummed. Finn stacked the wooden blocks into a small tower, his face thoughtful. Noah hung up his coat, the paper from the sandwich still crumpled in the pocket. He didn't know if their paths would cross again, but the image of those children in the snow stayed with him. In another part of town, Claire tucked Mila, Jace, and Theo into their beds. Their faces were peaceful now, but she couldn't shake the thought of the stranger who had given them warmth and safety. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again, and a part of her wasn't sure if she wanted to. Yet somewhere deep down, the night had left a mark on them both. Two lives on different roads, already bound by one act of kindness. 3 days after the snowy night at the park, Noah Hartley spotted Claire Morris again. He had just finished a repair job in town when he noticed a familiar car pulled over on the side of the road. The hood was up, steam rising into the cold air. He slowed his truck and pulled over. Claire stood beside the car, arms folded, her breath visible in the freezing wind. "Trouble?" Noah asked, stepping out. "It won't start," she replied, her tone guarded but not unfriendly. Noah reached under the hood, his hands moving with practiced ease. "Loose battery connection," he said after a moment. "You'll be fine once it's tightened." He fetched a small wrench from his truck and worked quickly. In minutes, the engine roared to life. Claire offered to pay him, but he shook his head. "No need," he said. "Some help doesn't need a price." She gave a short nod, her eyes searching his for a moment before she climbed back into her car. Noah returned to his truck, not knowing that the brief exchange had stirred both gratitude and unease in her mind. Later that week, whispers began to circle in town. Claire overheard two women talking near the grocery store. "He's been spending time around her kids," one said. "People like him know an opportunity when they see one." Claire kept her face neutral, but the words dug into her. She told herself it was just caution, the kind she had always practiced. Visits to Noah's house became rare, though Mila, Jace, and Theo often asked to see Finn. Then the storm came. It started as steady snow in the morning, but by afternoon, the wind turned sharp and the snow thickened into heavy sheets. By evening, the power went out across the neighborhood. Noah was home with Finn when a knock rattled the door. Claire stood there, her children close behind, wrapped in scarves and carrying blankets. "The roads are bad," she said. "We were bringing these to you, but now we can't get back." Inside, the air was cooling fast. The radiator gave one last groan before falling silent. The flicker of candles became their only light. Mila, Jace, and Theo sat bundled in blankets with Finn, their voices soft as they played a quiet game. Then Noah noticed the flush in the children's cheeks, the tired slump in their shoulders. He checked their foreheads. The heat under his palm told him enough. They had fevers. He went to the kitchen and opened the small cabinet where he kept medicine. There was only half a bottle of children's fever reducer left, enough for 2 doses at most. Claire's voice was tight with worry. "The roads are closed, Noah. We can't get anywhere tonight." Noah looked at the children, then back at her. "I'm going to the pharmacy," he said. "You can't. It's too dangerous." "I've already lost someone I love," he replied steadily. "I'm not letting any of these kids be in danger." He pulled on layers, his thick flannel, an old winter coat, a scarf, and a knit cap with a hole near the crown. Then he stepped out into the night. The wind was like a wall, pushing against him. Snowflakes stung his face as he made his way down the icy street. Halfway to the main road, A snowmobile passed close, throwing a spray of snow that nearly knocked him over. He hit the ground hard, but pushed himself up, thinking only of the children waiting at home. When he reached the pharmacy, its lights were dark, the door locked. He pounded until a man appeared from the back. "We're closed," the man called through the glass. "Please," Noah said, his voice cracking. "4 sick kids at home. They need medicine tonight." The man hesitated, then unlocked the door. Minutes later, Noah stepped back into the storm with fever reducer, electrolyte packets, and heat packs stuffed into his coat. When he returned, Claire was sitting on the couch with Emma's head in her lap, and the triplets curled up beside her. Candlelight flickered over her worried face. When she saw him, she stood quickly, relief clear in her eyes. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. Stepping forward, Noah set the supplies on the table. "Doesn't matter," he replied. "They're safe now." She helped him remove his soaked coat and sat him at the table, tending to the scrapes on his hands. The children sipped warm water mixed with medicine, their breathing slowly easing. For the first time in weeks, the tension in the small house lifted. Outside, the wind still howled, but inside, the warmth was not just from blankets or candles. It was from the quiet understanding that had finally bridged the distance between 2 different roads. Winter loosened its grip slowly. The last piles of snow melted into muddy puddles, and the air carried the first signs of warmth. For months after the ice storm, Claire Morris and her children visited Noah Hartley's home often. What had begun as short visits to return borrowed coats or share a meal turned into afternoons filled with the sound of children's laughter and quiet talks over coffee. The difference between their lives was still there. Claire's days ran with business schedules and tidy plans, while Noah's work as a carpenter shifted with each job that came his way. Yet somewhere in the middle, they had found common ground. The triplets no longer stood shy at the doorway, and Finn no longer waited for permission to hug them. In early April, Noah began restoring an old barn on the edge of town. The weathered structure had stood empty for years, but he saw the bones of something new, a place where he could open his own woodworking shop. On weekends, Claire brought the children to help. Finn and Jace carried small buckets of nails. Mila swept sawdust from the floor, and Theo followed Noah everywhere, fascinated by the tools. Claire often watched from a distance, leaning against the barn door, her arms folded but her smile easy. She found herself asking Noah about the work, about the repairs, about the future he imagined here. He answered with the same steady calm she had first noticed the night they met. By late spring, the shop was ready. On the morning of the opening, townspeople gathered outside. A simple wooden sign hung above the freshly painted doors, Hartley Woodworks. It was plain, with one corner chipped, but to Noah, it meant more than any polished design could. It meant a new chapter built with his own hands. Claire stood with the children near the entrance, her hair catching the sunlight. When it was time to speak, she stepped forward. "This year taught me that wealth isn't about what you store in a bank account," she said to the small crowd. "True wealth is found in kindness, in courage, and in giving when you have little to spare. This shop, and the kindness behind it, reminded me of that." She glanced toward Noah, her voice softening. "He reminded me of that." Applause rose, but Noah only nodded, his hands resting on Finn's shoulders. After the ribbon was cut, the crowd moved inside to see the workshop. Rows of neatly hung tools, fresh wood stacked against the wall, and the worn smell of sawdust in the air. Later that afternoon, the celebration moved to the meadow behind the barn. Picnic blankets were spread on the grass under the shade of tall trees. The children chased one another barefoot, while neighbors shared food and stories. Noah stood at a table, slicing a fresh loaf sandwich, handing out pieces to anyone who passed without a plate. Jace took a piece and looked up at him. "You didn't have to share this time," he said with a grin, "but you still did." "Some habits are worth keeping," Noah replied, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. As the sun began to lower, the air was filled with the hum of gentle conversation and the rustle of leaves. Claire spread a blanket near the edge of the meadow, calling the children over to rest. Noah joined them, lowering himself onto the blanket beside her. For a moment, they sat in easy silence. Claire leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. Her hand found his, their fingers fitting together without hesitation. Noah looked out over the scene, the triplets and Finn laughing together, the shared food, the warmth of a day that felt far from the cold night when everything began. The words of that first meeting came back to him, from a child's voice on a snowy bench. "You're like a bridge when the ice breaks." He understood it now. A bridge wasn't built for one person to cross. It was built so two sides could meet in the middle. Claire turned her head to look at him. Her smile, quiet, but certain. Noah squeezed her hand gently. There was no grand moment, no sudden change in the air, just the steady truth between them. Their lives, once on separate roads, now moved forward together. In the meadow, under the soft light of spring, the bridge they had built stood strong, not of wood or steel, but of trust, care, and the choice to keep walking toward each other, no matter the season.